What are the hurdles to a smooth transition of power? This is Inside Story. Is Gambia on a path to turmoil? After conceding defeat, President Yahya Jammeh has now changed his mind and is rejecting the result of the presidential election. What are the hurdles to a smooth transition of power? This is Inside Story.
And only Rago and youth. Kora, Daga, Selba, Soca, Afrofusion, Reggae, Dancehall. Good afternoon, welcome to our regular FM. Today, Thursday, 12th day of January 2017.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finnegan. He is reputed to be one of the world's most repressive and eccentric leaders who vowed to rule Gambia for a billion years, if God willed.
I don't
Following
think
the
so.
presidential election 10 days ago,
Yahya
Yahya Jammeh shocked many by accepting defeat to his rival Adama Barrow. Jammeh's conciliation was seen as the start of a new era of democracy in the smallest nation in mainland Africa. Now, though, it appears that Jammeh won't be relinquishing power after all. Will his demand for a new election mean turmoil for the country, and how can a peaceful transfer of power be achieved? Those questions we'll be putting to our guests right after our report from Mohammed Val.
1 week after his acceptance of defeat, Gambian President Yahya Jammeh now says the election was rigged and the vote should be repeated.
I hereby announce to you, Gambians, my total rejection of the electoral results and thereby annulling the elections in its entirety. And until we will go back to the polls, because I want to make sure that every Gambian has voted.
The announcement drew prompt condemnation from the US government and defiance from the president-elect.
The outgoing president has no constitutional authority to reject the result of the election and order for fresh election to be held. The IEC is the only competent authority to announce the results of election and declare a winner. It was already done so, and I am now the president-elect.
Barrow has called on his supporters to remain calm and to prepare for his inauguration in January. And he wants Jammeh to allow a smooth transfer of power.
I urge him to change his current position and accept the verdict of the people in good faith for the sake of the Gambia, our homeland.
Jammeh is a former military officer who has ruled the Gambia for 22 years. During his time in office, political opponents have disappeared or have been thrown in jail without trial. The country has suffered from economic and political isolation. Jammeh has won all the previous elections his government organized. So it surprised many around the world when he conceded defeat last week in the recent election. His rival Adama Barrow won 45.5% of the vote, while he got 36.7%.
It depends on your calendar. You are the president-elect now. I'm the outgoing president. So you give us time.
For his people and those who know him, pictures of him on the phone congratulating his rival looked promising.
I will never rule this country without your mandate since we started elections. And I will never cheat or dispute the elections, because this is the most transparent.
It's the most transparent election, but yet you can't accept the results.
Mohammed Val, Al Jazeera.
Well, Yahya Jammeh seized power in a coup in 1994. The devout Muslim claimed to be able to cure AIDS with prayer, a concoction of herbs and a banana. He also claimed to be able to cure female infertility and called for homosexuals to be beheaded. Jammeh is notorious for jailing his political opponents. He won 4 multi-party elections before this month's surprise defeat. The regional body, the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, refused to endorse his election victory in 2011. ECOWAS said that voters and the opposition had suffered what it called repression and intimidation. 3 years ago, Jammeh withdrew Gambia from the Commonwealth, which was pushing for reforms. Loss of membership further isolated the small African country internationally. Human rights groups criticized Jammeh's treatment of journalists. Gambians cast their votes in this latest election during a media blackout. All right, let's get the thoughts of our guests for today. Joining us from the Gambian capital, Banjul, is Halifa Sallah, spokesperson for the President-elect Adama Barrow. From Washington, D.C., we're joined by Jeffrey Smith, Executive Director of Vanguard Africa. And from London, Matala Toure, who's an independent analyst on West Africa. He's also a former senior analyst at IHS. Gentlemen, welcome to all of you. Halifa Sallah, we'll start with you. The video isn't particularly great on our Skype link, but we can hear you. What's the President-elect's view of Jammeh's rejection of the election result?
He did issue a statement yesterday indicating very clearly the process that this country has gone through to come up with the results of the 1st December 2016 presidential elections. It is very clear that under the Gambian constitution, a person elected has a 5-year term, and 3 months before the end of that term, we should have elections. And elections has taken place. The only authority responsible for announcing the results is the Independent Electoral Commission. They have done that, and President-elect Barrow is determined to be the victor of the elections. Fortunately...
So, am I right, just to clear something up, am I right in thinking that the current president, the incumbent, does have the right to contest the election result?
Well, what is very clear is that once an election result is declared, that stands. The only other authority that can look into the validity of the elections is the Supreme Court, which means that you have to file an election petition. What is abundantly clear is his announcement rejecting the results is immaterial, in the sense that you can accept or reject results of an election, but the results stand, unless it is questioned before the courts. So his pronouncement that the results were invalid and that we will have future elections has no legal foundation, no constitutional foundation. And that's precisely what President-elect Barrow said, that his pronouncement is just an opinion, has no legal foundation. He is President-elect. Jammeh should serve, outgoing President Jammeh should serve the rest of his term, and in January he is going to assume office as the President of the Republic of the Gambia. It falls on all members of the public to go about their business and leave the outgoing President Jammeh to serve his term and focus their attention on the day of inauguration of the President-elect.
Right. Just one more question, sir. President Jammeh said that a thorough investigation had been conducted since the poll. I mean, how they could have done that in 10 or so days, I don't know, 9 days, in which serious and unacceptable abnormalities in the electoral process had transpired.
He's a liar. He lies about everything.
Is there any chance that
he lies
the poll
about
could have
the
been
courts.
fundamentally
He lies
flawed?
about everything he is doing.
He has
His
already
agenda,
accepted the
basically.
result
He's a
as the
compulsive
verdict
liar.
of the people and the verdict of God. If he now questions it, well, he is the one, he who asserts must prove. He is the one who should go to the courts and prove his case. He cannot be judge, jury, and complainant at the same time. So I believe that he is someone who should go through the court if he is aggrieved. What is important is to know that such assertions over the air has no legal foundation. It should not be made in the first place. He knows where to go if he wants to question the validity of results of elections. As it stands, what we know is that President-elect Barrow is the President-elect of the Gambia, and that has been affirmed by the Independent Electoral Commission, and that cannot be questioned by any other authority except to the courts.
So thank you for being with us on Inside Story. We'll leave it there because the audio and video quality from Banjul are not particularly great. Halifa Sallah, they're the spokesman for the President-elect Adama Barrow. Let's bring in Jeffrey Smith, then in Washington, D.C., Executive Director of Vanguard Africa. Jeffrey, what do you think has happened? What can we read into Jammeh's acceptance of defeat and then, several days later, his rejection? What do you think has happened?
Well, unfortunately, this turn of events in the Gambia did not surprise many. For many observers of the Gambia, and certainly Gambians, themselves, they become accustomed to Yahya Jammeh's erratic behavior over the course of 22 years while he has been in power. I think, as Khalifa Saleh said earlier, just a week ago, Yahya Jammeh went on national television. He conceded defeat to President-elect Adama Barrow. Before the election, he said it would be the most transparent election in the history of the world, that Gambia's elections were, in his words, rig-proof. And then a week later, he does a complete U-turn on election results that were not only affirmed by Gambia's own electoral commission, they were affirmed by the Economic Community of West African States and the African Union. So this election has been universally accepted, universally affirmed, except for in the mind of Yahya Jammeh himself. I think several factors are at play here. I think, number one, a key issue here is there's very clearly some fear within Yahya Jammeh himself about being prosecuted for the myriad crimes he has committed over the course of 2 decades. And I think perhaps the opposition, some in the opposition, made a blunder in that regard in terms of making that public before the transition had officially taken place. Secondly, I think there's very, very clearly something happening within the military. I don't think outgoing President Jammeh would make the statement that he did, saying that the election was somehow rigged against him, if he did not have at least some support in the military. Interestingly, on the day that he announced the U-turn, the day before, actually, he had promoted 49 senior members of the military. It was a big story in the local media. So perhaps there's something going on there in the media. But I think first and foremost, he did have quite a scare put into him by a lot of the rhetoric being thrown around about him being potentially prosecuted.
Let's bring in Mutala Toure then. Former senior analyst at IHS, an independent analyst now in West Africa. Mutala, could Jammeh's announcement have been prompted by the prospect of prosecution under a new government? Did the opposition blunder?
Thank you very much for having me. First of all, we must take into account that what is happening in Gambia is unprecedented. It's the first time something like this is happening, so there is no experience about how to go about this peacefully. And then also we should bear in mind that President-elect Adama Barrow didn't win with absolute majority. He won by 45%. So currently Gambia is a divided country, and that should be taken into consideration. And I think some of the factors that drove Jammeh to make a U-turn, it's as well just after he conceded defeat, because Gambia didn't have this kind of experience before. People went to the street jubilating, thinking that Jammeh, the next day, he's out of power, and then we have a new president. So there was a lot of some destruction, bringing down his images, his posters that are littered all over the country, and then there were some kind of reprisal attack, house to house. And then he himself considered that people that were green, that's green is for the party color, APRC, became yellow, which is the opposition. So he became really, really scared. And then with all these talk about him being held accountable, I think he's fearful that his legacy is at risk. And then he's likely, like I said, he's likely to spend the rest of his time in jail. So he's really, really fearful. He has his back to the wall, and it's currently it's a dangerous time in the Gambia, and we've seen the rising risk of interstate war, even between Gambia and Senegal, even from the rhetoric from Senegal, that they're going to be forceful with Yahya Jammeh, that Yahya Jammeh should recognize this result, and then there is a likelihood of civil war. So the opposition should not rise to the bait of President Yahya Jammeh. Yeah. They should use non-violent means, and then see that he hand over come January.
Jeffrey Smith, I mean, the opposition has called for people to remain calm, lucid and vigilant and not to retreat. I mean, what happens if the people do take to the streets? Will Jammeh call a state of emergency?
They will take it to the street, to jam it,
that's
go
very
and get rid of him.
A very good question, and I think we should all be vigilant in watching what transpires in Gambia in the coming days. I think, first and foremost, the really important factor here, again, is that Jammeh lost the election. President-elect Barrow needs to assume power in January, have a peaceful transition of power according to the Constitution. And on the issue of potential violence, even before the election, those concerns were very high. So the Early Warning Project, for instance, which is a project at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, actually cited Gambia as having the fourth highest statistical increase in the world leading up to the elections in terms of the threat of state-led mass killing. So now with tensions rising once again, I think that is certainly an issue that we need to all be aware of. Importantly,